Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar, Moving Behavioral Research Online, the Next 6 Months. I'm Joe Ridholm, editor of Quirk's Marketing Research Review. Our host today is Jonathan Asher, Executive Vice President at EyeSee. Jonathan, take it away.
Good morning, and thanks to Quirks for providing this platform for sharing insights and ideas. Thanks to our client colleagues who are providing their thoughts and experience, and thanks to all of you who are in attendance. So, where are we today? Obviously, these past few weeks have been filled with unprecedented change in the way we live and work, the products and services we use, and how we shop. And while there have recently been some encouraging signs from the health community, the future still remains uncertain in terms of how long things will continue as they are, and when and how we'll get back to normal, and what normal will actually look like. Of course, most of us are in the insights business, and so we realize that the best way to reduce uncertainty is with knowledge, and that knowledge is obtained by doing research. So we'd like to share with you results from several studies we've conducted recently. The first group of tracker studies where we gauge what people are doing, how they're thinking and feeling. We've done that in both the US and in Europe so that we have that perspective and comparison. In addition, we've done replication studies where we repeated studies that were conducted prior to the crisis, some 6 months or a year ago, to see if the results we get today with the current situation holds up, which would give us confidence in conducting research now. We've done that for shopper studies, e-commerce, and social media advertising. What we're seeing generally in terms of current attitudes is that people are feeling uncertain, which in a way is a positive, that only a quarter of the people across the US, France, and Germany are feeling pessimistic or negative, with 3/4 being either unsure of where things are going, or some of them actually feeling positive about where things are heading.
Now we're going to talk a little bit, and we're running a little late. We're going to try to quickly move through shopper and digital testing, what we've done and where we can go from here. So Prab, let's start with you. Do you find the organization is more insight hungry for certain types of studies and certain types of information now during the crisis? And if so, what's the priority questions for the kinds of virtual shopping that we've been talking about?
Yeah, in terms of priority questions, I think it is very dynamic. Kind of Shruti mentioned it earlier. Consumer behavior is changing, and we got to change and understand what makes the most sense for us, right? Right now, there's a drastic shift that is happening towards the online delivery methods, and consumers experiencing the convenience of that. I'm positive a noticeable portion of the consumer behavior that is shifted towards this online purchasing model is going to remain the same. Online purchasing is not new, but it is interesting now, especially in the category where we operate. There are products where consumers are mainly buying at brick and mortar, and now they're purchasing it online. And this is a new behavior for them. And with this behavior likely to remain the same, that now places a heavy emphasis to better understand the online path to purchase model and how and where we can influence consumers. The questions, probably what I'm about to say, is probably not new, but depending on the brand and category in which you operate, it is becoming more important to better understand how to influence consumers before they reach an online portal for shopping, whether it is a traditional brick and mortar website or a pure play domain or a shopping delivery service provider. Let's say a consumer lands on Amazon, how can I make sure they click on my product on that product level page? And if I have successfully navigated them to my product detail page, I need to make sure they add my product to the shopping cart and not move away from my product detail page. And again, now with us not having the option to do in-person research work, identifying those technologically advanced research solutions and being able to do behavioral online research or behavioral research virtually is key. It creates efficiencies in the process and delivers insights at the speed at which businesses need it and the speed at which we are operating today.
Thank you, Prab. Very helpful. Shruti, you've had a lot of experience with virtual shopping. Could you explain how you leverage that type of tool for gaining in-store insights, which of course is especially useful now when it's not possible to conduct in-store testing?
Sure, absolutely. I think part of the reason why virtual shopping was always attractive to me, and a reason why I also nudged my team to consider it as an approach, is because of course, the feedback loop. It's faster, and I think that the faster component does not compromise the output. And if anything, the output, which is largely implicit in nature, so understanding someone's implicit reactions through the facial coding and the eye tracking, is invaluable. To your point, Jonathan, I think that that level of implicit understanding is even more heightened right now because of our environment. I think the typical, and there's always a time and place for typical ask and answer survey, right? We know that. But I do think that right now we're in a very interesting period of time where we might not always get you know, the level of response that gives us the clarity that we're looking for to make decisions as consumer marketers and consumer insights leads. And part of the reason why I think virtual shopping has scaled in importance is because of that, and also because of the fact that the journey to the shelf has radically shifted, and certainly because of what's happening. But I think that there was always a shift and a movement to online, and I think that the virtual shelf is something that people are seeing more so than the physical one. So to do an exercise that models more of the true virtual reality that someone is experiencing, and to understand the contextual cues and codes of what a virtual experience is like, and to do testing that's native to that is tantamount. And what we're noticing personally is a lot of value in understanding insights around attention, breakthrough, some of the typical battery of metrics that we look for. We're noticing that understanding those right now in the virtual context is supremely helpful as we think through our strategy, and also as we think through our learning plans. I think that's the other final thought I'll leave you and the audience with. I would not approach learning right now through the lens of strict validation. I think that's incorrect in my opinion. I think that right now all of us, more so than ever, need to be very much so in the modality of learning. And I think that through testing hypotheses, we're becoming sharper and faster with some of our decision making right now.
Yes, thank you. That's helpful. There's one more follow-up question. Because you mentioned both physical and digital, so certainly for digital shopping, using online testing tools makes a lot of sense, but a lot of people are finding that they can't do face-to-face or in-person testing for in-store issues and are relying on virtual shopping. I believe that's something you've also done and have comfort with. Is there something you could tell somebody who is skeptical about testing shopping for a physical store, but doing so through a remote online platform?
Sure. I think my immediate response, which hasn't changed as I've reflected on this question, is more so than ever right now is the chance to be more curious and more experimental with how you think about classic approaches. I think if you're someone who has always felt more comfort in the classic traditional way of in-person, no problem. There's going to always be a time for that in the future, and you can rebound to that. And I agree. There is a role for the physical. I think right now, as we are in a virtual environment, my point of view is that there is a lot of uptake and incremental value to supplement your learning holistically, and that the virtual environment, I think we are also realizing, is part of our future. So when you think about revisiting approaches, it's certainly one to spend some time with and to consider the pros and cons of.
Yeah, that makes good sense. And one of the things that you've touched on as well as Prab is the idea of context and trying to make sure that the environment is presented to the shopper as realistically as possible. I just want to see if we've got a video here that, there we go. Just gives a sense of the virtual platform that we've developed and part of what we created the company based on, knowing that virtual shopping can correlate very highly with actual behavioral shopping in a store as much as 0.8. And we've got different ways to do that because we know there are different needs. So something that's very robust could be more costly and time consuming than people can handle for the moment for a particular initiative, but they still need reality, and so a simple shelf representation would be sufficient. So things have come a long way in the last several years in terms of what can be done to get a respondent to feel like they're in a store and go through the behavioral exercise of shopping, even though they're looking at it on their laptop. So it's good for people to know that, because if you haven't had a look in a while, things may be very different than what you remembered seeing even just a couple of years ago. So from a flat shelf to something with a bit of dimensionality to full robust and a great deal of detail and all different levels of time and expense to create it. And Mirna, I thought this would be a good time for you to review with us the shopper research results for the replication study we did in that arena.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'll try to be quick. So similar to the social media ad retesting, we also did something with shopping studies. So we took two categories that are fairly similar but fairly different as well, and simply redid the field work again to try and prove whether our results are stable even in the time of crisis. So overall, the two categories do see some movement toward decreasing number of different brands bought. Changes in the share of shoppers per brand are between 0 and 9 percentage points in the toothpaste category and 0 and 5 in beer. So that's overall the category. But between brands, we see that actually the positions are kept. Market leaders remain market leaders. Challengers also keep their position, while the very small brands remain. So there are no larger shifts, although we do record some movement. Virtual shopping is excellent for feeling out trends and on-shelf performance, but it's not the same as just tracking cash register data. Right now, many companies do have issues with their supply chain, so the current cash register data might be skewed because of that, and not because of consumer preferences. We can still use virtual shopping to evaluate relative performance indicators. For example, we'd say that packaging, POS material, and planogram testing are safe right now if you need to pick a winning design. You can also do new product and concept testing, so just to make sure that your results are stable even through time.
So to provide just a broad overview of what we covered today, which was quite a bit of good information from everybody's experiences. I guess it comes down to what I consider three broad areas and things to think about. The first is it makes sense to continue doing research at this time. Now, obviously, that varies some with what the situation is that your company is experiencing. And it may vary on what topics you do research, but for most marketers who are anticipating re-engaging with shoppers in the coming months, now is the time to formulate plans for what that re-engagement would look like so you can hit the ground running when the time is right. And part of that planning is to understand how shoppers are thinking, feeling, and behaving, and how they might respond to something new that you're planning to introduce in the market. And we've seen that the research does hold up, and there are ways to include questions about what their sentiment is at the moment, and we can split the data accordingly. But in addition, we want to be flexible because the current conditions are different, and some of the traditional approaches that we might have been comfortable using or been very accustomed to for many years simply may not be viable right now, or they may not work as well. So the idea of being open, we heard a couple of the panelists talk about it, be open to newer ways of doing things, either that you've used a little bit but not fully embraced or had never used. Now could be a good time to understand those more fully and frankly take a chance. Vet them carefully because you want to make sure you know what you're getting, because sometimes something looks like it's providing a outcome, but it may not. So fully understand it, but be open to new possibilities for these new conditions. And then finally, make sure you're also learning about these new behaviors. We know that people are doing things differently, how they're shopping, what kinds of products they're buying, how they're using products. Let's make sure that we're not leaving those opportunities ignored. Just as simple as e-commerce, much more shopping online for CPG products than was ever the case. Now, it may not be exactly perfect. People are finding a lot of out of stock or long delivery times, so it may not be fully representative, but since people are doing it, it's a good opportunity for you to understand how are they doing it, what are the challenges, how can we better address their needs. So those are the things I think we're all sort of coming away with, that it makes sense to keep doing research, think about how you might do it differently, and also what are some other things to be testing that you might not have thought of otherwise. And I'll just see if our speakers have any quick one thing to take away. We had talked about that as a possibility. I think we still have time for that. Prab?
Yeah, I can jump in really quick. To me personally, online behavioral research, it creates efficiencies in executing research, especially on a global scale. And as I mentioned earlier, anytime you combine implicit and explicit techniques, the learnings are just rich. You have to try it if you haven't to see where it fits in your research toolkit.
Great, thanks. Shruti, is there one thing you want people to take away from today's session?
Yeah, I would say we're all natural, again, consumer marketers, and I would say put on that detective hat now more so than ever, be alert, and don't be afraid to go back and revisit how you typically approach learning and think through it in more of a disruptive manner as we're all heading into a largely virtual environment.
Great, thank you. Liubov, one big takeaway?
Yes. So I think that this was a super great, very inspiring session. And I think that we are living at the time of uncertainty, that many things are not clear, but this is exactly what creates a good environment for change and for great innovation.
Okay, thank you everyone for your great insight on these topics. Thank you to the audience for joining us today. If you have additional thoughts or questions, please feel free to reach out to us. You can use the email on the slide here. And also stay tuned for our next webinar on e-commerce, which is coming up on May 5th. We think you'll enjoy that information that we share as well and look forward to seeing you then.